My dad has been involved in an extramarital affair for about 25 years now. There's been a lot of breakthrough in this year alone, and C3, the community here, has been here for me through the length of that. It felt like such a unique and isolating experience, actively experiencing the betrayal and the rejection that comes with infidelity. And it's something that we're still walking through. There were constant nights of prayer of bringing Dad home. And this was even before I was a Christian. And I think a lot of that betrayal is what led me to Jesus. I needed something that was strong, steadfast, faithful. He is not an unfaithful God. He's not unkind. He's always there. He's always present. I became a believer about 7 years ago, acting out, looking for love in all the wrong places. And it was a slow walk, and it's still a walk. I would go to church, and sometimes it would be a real struggle. But I knew every time I walked out, I felt filled in a peaceful way. So I just kept coming back. And about 2 years ago, I was invited to C3. This past year, I received a text message from my dad, and he had coverings all over his face. He had just gone through an MRI, a full scan at NYU. He'd been experiencing stroke-like symptoms, and what we discovered was that over the last 3 to 5 years, he's been experiencing very minor strokes. I essentially had to extricate him from his living situation in New Jersey. He'd been living with his mistress for the last decade or so. He and I had plans to go back down to Atlanta, where my mother lives. I took a 2 to 3 month leave of absence because in that drive down to Atlanta, my dad decided of his own accord that it was time to move back in with my mom. It was not something that my mother and I had ever foreseen ever happening. From the morning of finding out my dad was in the hospital to the drive down to Atlanta to walking through that transition, really through the end of February, the C3 community was around me. They were surrounding me with prayer. Not everything is sorted out in our lives when we want them to be. But what I do know through this experience is that Jesus is at the end of the equation. And as uncomfortable as walking out the pain is, and as uncomfortable as the reconciliation is, every day there might be something that comes up that triggers an old trauma of betrayal. But I know God has a plan for that. He has worked miracles in my life that I didn't even realize I was praying for. It's not perfect. Reconciliation is not perfect. The nature of the word is that things need to be reconciled. But I know with my God that there's a lot that I don't need to be in the details of. I need to give him room to work that. Having a dinner party every Wednesday to go to, speaking life over people. God has completely removed the spirit of loneliness over my life. As an only child and going through that with my family, that was a very isolating and lonely experience. God sees me. God knows every square inch of my life. Sometimes it's a little bit of work and a pep talk to myself of like, you've got this, God's got this. But it's a new sense of boldness. It's a new sense of fearlessness. I've seen the power that God is imparting through his people, for his people, and I just want more.